This is a little trivia, but this woman makes the best cherry pie in the state of Iowa.
My name is Jill Applegate, and I am the co-chair of Iowa's Children's Policy Coalition. And today we are honored to meet with Vice President Joe Biden. We're currently on his tour bus, so if there's a little background noise, don't worry. But we're really excited to talk with the Vice President about the issues facing children and families as we lead up to the caucus next Monday. So thank you, Mr. Vice President, for being with us today.
Happy to be.
All right. So we're going to talk about 5 different topics today. A variety of things: health, early education, safety, issues like that. I'm going to pass it right off to Emily first, and she's going to start us off with health.
Hi, Emily Harris with Every Child Matters. I am a mother of 2. I have a 6-year-old and 1 due in May. So children's health to us is very important because children's health care is very expensive. Because of that, my 6-year-old is currently enrolled on Medicaid. And when she was born with a heart murmur. So she's got a pre-existing condition already. And within the state of Iowa, the Medicaid system can kind of vary day to day based on whether or not you'll have coverage, who's going to be your provider, that kind of stuff. And so coverage for us is really important. And we know that healthcare starts even earlier than just birth. We know that starts with maternal health as well. So as president, what actions would you take to ensure that all children have health coverage and receive health services that meet their needs?
Let me start off giving a little background. I understand about children's health. When I first got elected, I got a phone call saying my wife and daughter were dead, and my 2 kids were very badly injured. One was in a body cast of his entire body, from his ankles to his neck and arms, for a long time, and the other had a severe skull fracture. So I was a single parent, and I understand. So the one thing I start off by telling them is that I'm going to make sure that everybody has the kind of coverage that I insist for my own family. So starting off with, in terms of healthcare, first of all, dealing with the issue of prenatal care, which is really, really important. The access to that depends upon the ability to go in early on and be able to afford. That's why in the Affordable Care Act we passed, you're able to go in and you can determine way ahead of time what particular problems you may be facing. And for example, I had a daughter who was born with thank God, there was a lot of a really good pediatrician. One leg, because the socket was not completely formed, one leg, had we not gotten her in a Pavlik brace for 5 months, one leg would have been shorter and longer than the other leg, and she would have permanent limb. She ended up being a great athlete, didn't have it because we were able to protect her early on. And so everybody should be entitled to know as best they can what the circumstance when that child was born was likely to happen in terms of physical health. Secondly, I think that the whole idea of providing for child care, which we put together a long time ago, and your state Trump has finally once again funded it, is you can be up to 600% of poverty and still get health care for children. But I don't think that's enough. I think it has to go beyond that. I think you have to be in a position where you are able to determine really early whether or not a child has the capacity or a problem that their capacity is impacted on that they can't learn. For example, poor eyesight, be in a position where they have, like I had, a speech impediment, being able to pick those things up early. And so one of the things I propose is changing the way in which we deal with funding education. I propose that for all Title I schools, we in fact triple the amount of money we spend on Title I schools, guaranteeing that we have teachers who are competent and paid well and that want to go into Title I schools and ensure that every child in America has access to education at age 3, 4, and 5. I know you have it at 5, but a lot of states don't. A national requirement, and that's across the board. Thirdly, we double the number of, and we can afford to do this, and we triple this with funding. We afford to make sure that we have double the number of school psychologists, double the number of school nurses, double the number of social workers that exist in schools. But the point is that what we're able to do is, with that cadre of people, identify early on any particular problems, including mental health problems that children have, because an awful lot you all are involved in this. My son set up the largest program in the country dealing with abused children as Attorney General of the state of Delaware. And one of the things that, and we funded it to millions of dollars, I'm not able to do it anymore because I'm running for president, but the Bo Biden Foundation still exists. And what we found out is that people don't know enough to know what they don't know. And parents don't know enough what they don't know. So if you have in school, you have this nurses and school psychologists and social workers, you're able to intervene early on, because we found out that a lot of we need a significant more impact on looking at mental health. And the one generation that is at the greatest risk for anxiety in the world is in the United States, are people, the so-called Z generation, 7 years old to 17 years old. They're in trouble. And what happens is they end up engaged in counterintuitive activities that are not good for them. And they end up in a position where their anxiety sometimes ends up generating other problems for them, mental problems. And so, and the other thing is that if you're looking at these schools and you have social workers in the schools, you're able to go in and intervene where parents don't know what they need to know. It's not they're not good parents, but they don't know enough to know what they need to know. And so, and they're really willing and able to participate. They'll take the advice. In addition to that, I think it's important that we think about how we're going to deal with the health care for these children all the way through. We can't just end it at, when you get out of prison. It's got to continue. We've got to have more mental health facilities around the country as well, including mental health, particularly in poorer communities and in rural America. There are very few places you can go to get that kind of help. So I propose funding significantly more mental health facilities, and we need many more nurses that have a psychiatric background as well, about 38,000 short. So my program goes through all of these things and funds them, and then within reach to fund. It's not like we're talking about Medicare for all and $35 trillion. We're talking about things that are in our wheelhouse that we can do. What was the other part of the question?
That was it. Yeah, you did a good job.
Well, but there's an awful lot. Think about it. There's an awful lot we can do. I mean, Christy and I were talking about it when she was first lady and with the governor and getting business. We're able. Look, businesses are all of a sudden beginning to realize that it's in their interest to do something about dealing with kids that are at risk, and because the expression I've used for a long time, I got criticized for using it a while ago. I said these are all our children. They're not somebody else's children. They're all our children. They're the ones who lift our national ambitions. They're the kite strings who lift our national ambitions aloft. Well, what we've spent a lot of time doing, and Christy has as well, is making sure that businesses understand that we can deal with community schools as well. Where we bring in the community school, we bring in businesses that in fact are prepared to help fund aspects of the kind of job opportunities that are available when you get, not for infants, but for children who are in 5th, 6th, 7th, 8th grade, learning a direction of where they think they want to take their learning. And so you have them working in programs that businesses put together, teaching skills and the like. So you end up with credits. Fundamentally partnering with community colleges in order so by the time you graduate you have college credits that you've already accumulated. One of the places where you have a problem in my opinion is that we don't spend enough time focusing on children and children's health and their mental health and their opportunities that relate to things where they're going to make a living with their hands, where not everybody's going to go to college or want to go to college. But we can make a serious living learning how to work with your hands. We notice, and the other program we don't spend much time on, but it develops the mind. All the great universities are coming out with these studies in the last 5 to 7 years. Music, don't spend any time with music anymore. That's the first thing that gets cut. In addition, and maybe I'm sounding too much like an educator, my wife is a professor, my deceased wife was a teacher, I taught for a long time. And what people don't get is that the after-school programs that I put together in the bill when we did the community policing thing, it really made a big difference for people because kids want to also, for their physical health, they want to avoid crises. They want to avoid getting sucked into. So it's awful. You have to, and especially with guys. And what happens is, hey man, we're going to go do such and such. Hey man, I love to do that, man. I do that stuff all the time, man. But I got a game, or I got to do such and such. You got to give. The part that I've learned, teaching and learning and raising kids, is you've got to build in excuses for people to do what they think is right to overcome the peer pressure that exists. And that's beyond very young children, but it gets to 8, 10, 12, 15-year-olds as well. But there's also a lot more. I'm sorry to mention.
No, it's okay.
Do you want me to go next? Okay, I can go next. I'm Lana Shelton. I'm with the Iowa Community Action Association. We're part of the Community Action Network. More than 1,000 agencies across the country providing services to individuals and families that have a lower limited income. In Iowa, we have 17 nonprofits. We still have an office in every county, so all 99 counties. So we have a real rural emphasis in our work. We know there are about 40 million people in the country who are living in poverty, and we see their needs vary greatly from stabilizing their life to helping them overcome the barriers of becoming self-sufficient. So as president, what would you do to make sure that parents can provide for those basic needs and save some money for their children's future?
Well, that's a profound question, and it doesn't lend itself to a formula. First of all, a lot of it has to do with probably institutional racism, a significant portion of it. Not out here because you don't have large African American and the black population, but a significant portion has to do with institutional racism. And it relates to everything from the value of your home, how much you pay for your insurance on your car, to whether or not you get a job, to whether or not your children get into school, etc. So that's a whole section. If you want me to talk about it, go back and talk about that. That to me is one of the things that got me involved in public life in the first place. But the second piece of this is that we have a corporate culture today that is not what it was even 25 years ago. No longer, we have more people, corporations are making more money than ever made in all of history, and they're profitable. But they have brought on to a theory that has become sort of, they call it short-termism, but brought on to a theory that they only have one obligation. The only obligation they have is to their stockholders. There's no other obligation. So what that has done over the last 15 years, for example, from 2003 to 2013, there was a study done up in New England at the University of Massachusetts showing that of the hundreds of billions of dollars that corporations made, of all the profit they made, they took 56% of it and bought back their own stock. So that all that did was raise the value of the stock that was left. That's how CEOs and managers get paid, significantly increasing the pay and further limiting the access to a whole range of profit. So secondly, they took 37% of that and gave dividends to stockholders. Anyway, leaving 9% for everything else. 9% for investing in their employees, 9% for research and development, all of it, 9% for investing in the community. And they brought on to the theory that existed in the very beginning, that there's no obligation to the community or to their employees. None. No legal obligation. And what that's caused is an awful lot of real pain and suffering for employees where the profits have gone up. For example, when Reagan was president, the CEO of a corporation made 34 times what the average employee in the corporation Now it's 427 times. And so I think that's the exact number, but I'm maybe off by a couple. It's over 400.
Okay.
So as my mother would say, who died and left them boss? What happened here? But it's all about short-termism. And so because the economy, the economic rules encourage behavior. The behavior that's encouraged is if you're only going to be a CEO for 6 years instead of 12 or 14, you try to get as much as you can, as quickly as you can, and move as rapidly as you can. The end result of that is not only in the corporate area, but because unions have been clobbered and hurt so badly. There's been a war on labor for the past, back when I was working with Tom, I mean, it's been a war on labor. I made a speech, if Tom around, he'd tell you, I got a lot of heat for it because I spoke to the National Chamber of Commerce back in 1990, the national meeting, and I said, you're waging a war on labor now, and you're making a gigantic mistake. What happened is that we're now in a situation where not only are they engaged and they've spent over $1 billion last year trying to prevent employees from unionizing. $1 billion has been spent. Okay. Engaged in unfair labor practices to keep them from being able to organize. I won't go through the detail, but it relates to the question, believe it or not. And so, but what really has changed is that you now have hourly workers who are not unionized, who are able to be convinced by the chambers of commerce that labor is their problem, all of a sudden having what we Catholics call an epiphany. It's like, oh my God. Last year alone, overtime was denied hourly workers who are non-union $1.4 trillion in lost wages. $1.4 trillion in overtime. So, there's three things that have to happen, in my opinion. And this will take a bus ride all the way back to Delaware. I'm sorry to go on, but I feel very strongly about this stuff. Number one is that there has to be a change in the rules relating to corporate responsibility so that they have obligations to exceed beyond their stockholders. You even have the Business Roundtable, the biggest company in the world in the United States, coming to me, the former governor of Michigan, who headed my last year as vice president, asked whether I would lead an effort to get greater corporate responsibility. Brought in, did that, okay? Brought in 8 of the top 20 CEOs of the 20 largest corporations in the country. They're worried we eat their own seed corn. Everything's short term. They're not able to invest long term because you got, as one guy said, the former chairman of the Bond Company said, we have some little sniveling SOP up in New York who is going to, I have to go to an interview with, is going to say to me, what's your profit next quarter? If I can't tell him a profit, then he's going to downgrade my stock. And so what I had to do, I had to lay off the people who were working on the following research. We laid them off. So they realized this is killing them. And so one whole piece of this requires that there be greater corporate responsibility in taking on the responsibilities within the community as well as their employees. But the other piece is that we have to change the law. Right now you have more people who are, if you having to have signed non-compete agreements, who are not labor, they're not organized labor. If you go to work for Jimmy John's making sandwiches and you want to go across town to get a 10-cent raise working for McDonald's, you have to sign a non-compete agreement. 8 million had to sign non-compete agreements. That has nothing to do with anything other than suppress wages and working conditions. Secondly, you find yourself in a position where there are non-compete agreements that relate to having nothing at all to do with trade secrets or competition or anything else. In addition, you have workers being in a position where they're required not to, for example, I was up in Boston in a pickup line with the food and commercial workers, and they were going after Whole Foods. I think it was Whole Foods, one of the big chains. The chains had made $4 billion in profits, but they were trying to cut wages and pensions. They made $4 billion. Okay, and it wasn't Whole Foods. It was when I went up to Boston.
It was Stop and Shop.
Stop and Shop. And but what happened was you had I looked out, I spoke to about 800 people in this big parking lot of a big shopping center with a Stop and Shop being picketed. And guess what? Of the 800, there were no more than 150 worked for Stop and Shop. They were hourly workers saying, man, we're getting screwed too. So the thing that's starting to move here is you have ordinary workers realizing how badly they're being treated by corporate America. In addition, we have to have a minimum wage of $15 an hour across the board. Now, I've worked like hell. I got help. Governor Cuomo came up and asked me to help him get it back to New York. We did. I did it in Chicago. I mean, I've been going around the country. Before I ran for president, going around the country raising the minimum wage, and it should be raised nationally to $15 because anything below that, you're living at a poverty level. But one of the biggest things is housing. You're in a situation where you have so many people lacking access to adequate housing. And that's why I have a proposal for making sure it needs to be UDAG grants, not anymore. Making sure that you have, you never have to pay more than 30% of your income for housing, and we're going to fund through the Department of housing units that you get credit that you never have to make, and it's universal. No more than 30% of your wage has to go to housing loans, because homelessness is becoming a giant activity, mainly affecting children.
Right.
More people are on the street, more children are on the street as a consequence of domestic abuse and lack of housing across the board. So, in addition, there's a whole range of things relating to how we make sure that we deal with job opportunities. And the job opportunities piece goes back a little bit to this education piece I talked about. So I propose that if I only have $1 to spend, I want to spend it on preschool as opposed to post-high school. Because all the studies you all know, my daughter's a social worker. She's deeply involved in this stuff for long, she has a master's in social work. What's happening is the new studies are coming out showing that if you have a child, no matter what their background in terms of the home they come out of, whether they're not in any books, or they're not spoken to, or CDs aren't played for them, or whatever. What happens is if you start them in 3rd grade and they go to school, not daycare, school, they go to school, you can in fact increase by up to 58% the prospects they will go to all the way through school and all the way through high school and be qualified for either a certificate and or a community college. And that's why I provide for free community college for everybody who qualifies, including people coming back to community college. Because you have a lot of parents find themselves in a position that you kind of indirectly referenced, where they've been doing okay and all of a sudden what happens? Well, we lost 220,000 retail jobs in the last, I guess, 17, 18, 19 months, whatever it is. Average salary, $50,000 a year, average age 49, all high school educated. What the hell are they going to do? Why do they lose those jobs? Because you all now buy your Christmas gifts, you buy it on Amazon. You go and you shop online. They're not bad folks, but the fact is that's why all these outlets have closed across the country. You don't see a Saks outlet now in Chicago, where Saks Fifth Avenue had their outlet in Chicago. You don't see Benetton, you don't see. And so we have to focus on parents who also find themselves, the highest increase in drug abuse is people between the ages of 48 and 55. 48 and 55. Because why? They go through, they bust their necks their whole lives, and all of a sudden they've been able to live a middle-class life, breaking their necks, and wow, now they have nothing. They have nothing. And so it requires us to not only look at the child, but look at the circumstance the parent will find themselves in order for them to be able to have the wherewithal and the capacity to take care of those children's needs. And one thing we didn't talk about, we can talk about it if you want to later, is the deal what my son put together was that cell phone you all have. It's a dangerous item. It's incredibly dangerous for children. And it's the reason why there's such a significant increase in child abuse and child molestation. majority of child abuse is a consequence of parents and or relatives abusing their children. It's someone that they knew. Someone that they knew. And the numbers, you know them, they're significant. They're significant. But we're not paying much attention to it. And so one of the things we have to do is, it used to be like when I wrote the Violence Against Women Act, no one wanted to talk about it. It was a dirty secret. No one wanted to know. You knew the guy next door was beating his wife at night. Well, that's a private matter. Well, no more. No more. Well, the same thing with the child abuse. It's happening and people know it. And so what we're trying to do is let teachers, educate teachers and the social workers in the schools to identify the child that has that problem. Because what happens? And if it's a young boy and he's seen his mother abused, violence is a learned behavior. I did 1,000 hours of hearings on this. Literally 1,000 hours of hearings. And so you'd think the last person who would abuse is someone who watched their mother or their sister being abused. Wrong. It's a learned behavior. So there's so many things we could do relative to the child's overall health. From everything but identifying early on that they can't see the blackboard, all the way to identifying that they come in and they have been abused or sexually abused by an uncle or a neighbor or someone they know. And that's what usually happens. I get too tied up because I'm sorry, but there's a lot we can do. So much, and it's within our wheelhouse to be able to do it. But part of it is being honest and educating the public. I'll give you one example of stuff. When I wrote the Violence Against Women Act, what happened was all the women's groups opposed it. There wasn't a single women's group that supported it. Now didn't support it because they thought it would take the focus off of choice, and other women's groups would take the choice off the focus off of gender. I couldn't get any help. So I finally went out to, there was a meeting in Rhode Island of the rape crisis centers and the providers, and then in Seattle, Washington. And I went to these two groups to speak as a chairman of the Judiciary Committee and spoke to them and said, I need your help. I need your help to get engaged in getting something done. And finally they put such pressure on the women's groups, including the university women, the including them. So finally, Ellie Schmiel said at my conference table in the Senate back in '92, "What are we doing? Let's help this guy." And everything began to change, but no one wanted to talk about it. This was a dirty secret, and a lot of people had tried. So I'll give you an example. You may remember there was this young woman who was a model in New York City, and she kept having a problem. I'll tell you her name. And she kept having a problem with her employer, kept hitting on her because she lived in the upper 50s in a fine apartment building. She was in a high rent district, and she had an efficiency and wanted a 1-bedroom. Every time she'd go in and ask for the 1-bedroom apartment, he'd hit on her. So finally, she said, "I want my deposit back. I want to leave. I want to get." And that was it. She wouldn't go back. She was on a shoot in New York somewhere, I don't know where. Her cell phone rings. This is in 98, I guess. Her cell phone rings, and it's the landlord saying, "Look, we got you 1-bedroom, no problem. Just stop in on the way back in. Stop in the restaurant bar. I'll be there. We can sign it. It's yours." So she goes and she says, "Okay, well maybe it's gonna be okay." She walks in the restaurant bar. Now this is not some dive. This is a upscale restaurant bar in a first floor of an upscale apartment complex. I think it's on 58th Street. And he hits on her again. So she gets up and says she's going to leave. And she walks out. He had hired 2 goons to follow her out. And you remember this. They slashed her face with razors. Remember that case? They slashed her face with razors. And in order to just vengeance because she wouldn't do anything to ruin her career. So I was holding the Violence Against Women hearings, and she said she was willing to testify. I said, "Before you do, I want to let you know what you're about to get into." So I met with her. I said, "I don't want to put you in a terrible spot because you're going to be victimized as soon as you testify." And I said, can I ask you some questions? And she said, yes you can. I said, what did your mother say when she found out? She said, why were you in a bar? What did your girlfriend say? Did you have a bra on? How short was your skirt? Were you wearing underwear? What was it? It doesn't matter whether she walked in there stark naked. No man has a right to touch her at all. Well, the same thing we have to do, and when we ripped that Band-Aid off, all of a sudden people started saying, oh God, I can't be quiet now when I see what's going on here and there, whatever. Well, the same thing exists with child abuse. We don't talk about it. We don't deal with it. We pretend it's not happening. As a public, good people remain silent. So part of what we have to do is what you guys are doing and raise the profile of this and let them know how many people are being hurt. Sorry.
No, you're okay. I know you need to wrap up, but you have actually, I'm Sheila Hansen with the Child and Family Policy Center, and I'm the co-chair of this coalition. You've actually pretty much answered a lot of our questions with some of the stories and the things that you have shared with us that you want to do. My last question, if you want to expand on it at all, is I'm a foster parent, and I opened up my newspaper one day and I saw this ad that said Fort Dodge really needs to have foster parents, especially for children birth to 2. We usually hear that it's teenagers, but they had a real shortage for birth to 2, and we can do that. So went through the classes and signed up and went through the process of getting the license. Even today, even after having a couple of placements, I get phone calls every day that say, can you take Johnny, he's 18 months old, we're looking for a short term. 10 minutes later, Michael, we're looking, he's a 2-year-old, we're just looking for maybe 5 to 6 month placement. Just wondering what you could do, and I think you alluded to a lot of it earlier, as president, what actions would you take to ensure the safety and well-being of all children living in the United States?
You and I were talking about this. Why don't you talk about the 0 to 2 years old, 3 years old, about what you learned in France when you were doing this? It's kind of fascinating, and then I'll be happy to. Because I was asking
before
about.
Tom was committed, his major priority was to get universal preschool for kids and quality and a matrix, so we'd understand what quality daycare is for parents, so they would know if they had a licensed daycare or not. So we went to France with the Henrys from Oklahoma and looked at the French preschool system, and we visited preschools and talked to parents. The preschool teachers in France are paid on the same salary schedule as teachers in this country. It doesn't start at kindergarten or first grade. It starts with early childhood, and the kids all have their medical records travel with them from that time, so it's seamless. It's not like here where you've been in preschool and you all of a sudden start kindergarten and you don't have any idea what has happened to this child before. So it's a seamless system. And the French told us that the French people would fire any politician or never vote for them if they tried to take away the French preschool system, because they're working parents and they walk their kids to school and they're fed well at school. The feeding program is, so it was interesting to see how and it was a partnership between the country and also the city. So the city was providing the meals, the country, it was just part of the French culture that they take care of their kids early on. And my first question when I went into this 3-year-old preschool is, why do all these kids have glasses on? I said, I've never seen so many kids with glasses. They said because we identify them when they're 2, especially in our really poverty or high poverty areas, and we start having their parents bring them in for just a couple hours a week, and as a result we can start identifying psychological problems, hearing problems, eye problems, and so we start working on that. That's why all the kids had on their little glasses. So it was just fascinating, and we realized you can't just take the French preschool program and bring it to Iowa, but it did influence and it really influenced what we did. And I think one of the best things that happened, and it's one of the reasons why I'm supporting the vice president, is that we were able, even without a Democratic legislature for 8 years, we were able to engage the head of Principal Life Insurance, Max Phillips. We had the 2 top business leaders in the state, with a Democratic governor, Republican legislature, and with all the early childhood folks who were empowered to come in and be experts on this issue and We went out to communities all over the state. We did like what we're doing here on the bus. We went to every little community and explained to parents why it was important. Not we were trying to take their children away from them, but we're trying to help them be better parents, and took questions. And it took 8 years. And finally, with a divided, half and half Senate that year, we were able to start that process. We elected another Democrat to follow a Democrat, and Chuck Culver then. So we had, I know we've backslid, if there's such a word, but we had universal preschool for 4-year-olds, and you're talking about 3-year-olds, and you're talking about a much more comprehensive plan.
The reason I wanted her to speak to that, because we were talking about, if you think about preschool, or you think about daycare, we tend not to think in terms of a 6-month-old, an 8-month-old, a year-old, a year and a half old. And one of the problems, and my daughter ran the largest social agency in the state of Delaware, I said, now she's running 7 Boys and Girls Clubs trying to deal with drug issues. Anyway, what happens is the ability to be able to determine whether or not the foster parent is qualified, or the foster parent is in fact available to do the job, is states don't do a very good job of it. They don't pay a whole hell of a lot of attention to it. And because first of all, it's hard to get people to say, I will be a foster parent. And secondly, a number of foster parents, I don't want to be maligning all foster parents by any stretch of the imagination, but a number of foster parents find themselves in a position where the compensation is the overwhelming reason why they're seeking to be able to do that. And particularly the younger the child, the greater need and concern you have for who the foster parent is going to be. And I think there's only 2 things that you can really do relative to that at a federal level. The words of a president matter. A president can, by his or her words, send a nation to war, bring peace, let hate come out from under the rocks. It can do a lot of things. Presidents are supposed to be able to persuade. I have found the things I've been able to get done, and the president's given me authority as vice president to do, is when I talk about it, when I proselytize about what needs to be done. Part of it is, I really mean it, is educating the public, is going out and convincing the public, explaining. I drive my staff crazy, and poor Christy's been watching me with these days. I say, speak English to me, not as opposed to Spanish, but as opposed to complicated. If whatever you're going to put in a press release for me, if you can't pick up the phone and call your cousin Mary, who lives in wherever, and say to her over the telephone once, and she understands it, don't write it for me. I really mean it. Not a joke. Not a joke. And it's hard. You know how hard it is to do. So presidents, one of the things that because I've worked with this with my daughter, we've talked a lot about it before I decided to run, is that you've got to be able to start to talk to the American people and show them, give them examples of, tell a story. Now I know I get criticized for telling stories, but you tell a story and people can understand it. You don't play a game, it's got to be honest, the story's got to be real. But if you talk about and you show as a president of the United States that this is what happened. I'm in a situation where this little baby was in the foster care with such and such, but because the Department of Child Services in this particular state was not funded enough, and there weren't enough social workers to get out and check on this child ended up in this circumstance, or this child ended up being abused. Look at the number of abuses that occur as a consequence of sexual abuse among foster parents across the country, and it is a pretty big deal. And so we have to be able, the thing that we could do at a federal level is we could fund states who are willing to put in really rigorous approaches to their foster care, their foster family programs. And just like we can do, for example, one of the things in terms of children, we have to change the way in which we deal with children in the criminal justice system. We have to change it so there's no private prisons, none, zero. No child, I fought this my whole career in judiciary, I remember, no child in an adult prison, period, ever. And we haven't even talked about what Tom did with IDA. That's a gigantic piece of this. A gigantic piece of this. But it's not being funded. We've never funded it beyond 15%. One of the proposals I have, it's a lot of money. It's a lot of money. But we should fully fund IDEA. Fully fund it. And we can save children's lives. We can make them, put them in a position where they can live a productive life. And the reason why I think, I'm going to be blunt about it, the reason why I get criticized, well, a lot of reasons, good reason I get criticized, but one of the reasons I get criticized for saying we have to work with Republicans and Democrats is if you go out and just berate them, nothing gets done. But if you appeal to their conscience and put them in a position where you say, look, this is beneficial to you. For example, I go into these the wealthy neighborhoods and I say, I want you to pay $45 billion to deal with the at-risk kids. And guess what? It's in your interest because there's going to be a lot fewer kids using drugs. There's going to be a lot fewer kids out there. And a lot fewer kids you're going to worry about robbing your home. A lot fewer kids. They go, oh, yeah, I can see where, yeah, that makes sense for me. It makes everybody better. I'm sorry, I'm looking. I apologize.
Nope, you're definitely fine. I think we've probably arrived at your next destination here. So,
well, look, what you're doing really, I'm not trying to be nice to you, really matters.
Thank you.
I think, no, but here's what I think. I think the country is ready. I think the country is ready to, you know, I made a speech on Dr. King's birthday down in South Carolina. And I said, you know, I remember the first inflection point on civil rights was when I was a high school kid and turning on the television and seeing Bull Connor and his dogs on their hind legs reaching for, you know, black women coming out of church and fire hoses literally ripping clothes off and the skin off of people and this awful setting. And if you came from a state like Iowa, where there's very few blacks, or you came from a state that didn't have a large black population like mine, you looked and said, my God, that really happens. I didn't believe that. I didn't know that. And when they saw it, as Dr. King said, it was the second emancipation. Bull Connor thought he'd put a wooden stake in the heart of civil rights. Well, guess what happened right after that? The Voting Rights Act, the whole range of things that occurred. I think we're at a second inflection point because of this president, because of his viciousness dealing with minorities, because of the way he treats women and children, but the way I think the country's ready. And because they didn't believe it before. They didn't believe that you actually would see people coming out of a field carrying torches, their veins bulging. And if you close your eyes, you remember what happened down in Virginia. You know, you just close. Did you ever think you'd see that in 2017? I never thought I'd see that. But all of a sudden people go, whoa, holy God. And all the other things that they've done, I think we're at one of those other inflection points. Instead of putting a stake in the heart of being much more progressive and reaching out to help people, I think people are going, oh man, whoa, this is wrong. We can do this. And I really believe it. I really believe it. So I think you're going to find you're going to have more work on your hands than you've ever had. And I'd like to ask a favor. I'd like to send you a copy of what my son's foundation is doing. Not to do anything with it, but just to see. And how he's going around educating attorneys general around the country. Well, he's not now, he's passed, but it is. So teach people that what so much we can do to make children safe, and parents don't know. I mean, look what's going on. How many of you have a son or daughter or a cousin who in fact, you know, they put out a picture of themselves at 14 lying on a dock with in a bathing suit looking sexy with their name on it. I mean, you know, they're not bad kids, but that's the thing that invites so much of what's being done. Parents don't even know how to deal with it. And so I really appreciate what you're doing.
Thank you so
Thank
much.
you.
Thank you so much, Vice President Biden, for having this really great conversation today. And voters are really going to appreciate hearing you weighing in on these issues.
What they really appreciate is you.
Thank
No,
you.
no, no. Don't underestimate what you're doing.
Thank you.
Thank you.